people might expect this to be similar to Deadpool Wolverine, but Wolverine's a much more stoic, gruff character. Batman to me is, as I've said, he's a guy who's gone through an entire lifetime of studying the world's most, finest martial arts disciplines and meditation, and he's won 1,000 battles, he's saved the world. But he also has a sense of humour, and as I say, it's a super dark sense of humour, so you can't really get around him, and the reason for that is that my favourite line in it is where Batman just says, look, I spent years fighting crime alongside a hyperactive kid, and my arch enemy's a disfigured clown. Are you still talking?
Hey everyone, I'm Billy, and welcome back to Half the Picture. I'm so excited to say that our guest this episode, our returning guest I might add, is none other than Grant Morrison, the comic book writer behind such works as All-Star Superman and Batman Arkham Asylum. We had Grant on today to talk about Batman Deadpool, their latest comic, which is, as you can probably imagine, is a Batman Deadpool crossover. By the way, if anyone wants to check out our first conversation with Grant, you can do so at the link in the description, or you can check out the channel. I was so thrilled to talk to Grant about Batman Deadpool, and I really wanted to dive deep into their process writing the comic, get into the nitty-gritty of how they put it together with all the characters and how it worked with DC as well, and just the meticulous craft of putting together the story. And we also touched base on James Gunn Superman movie, which, when we last spoke, it had just come out, and I really wanted to pick their brains on, Grant's thoughts on the movie, because obviously Grant is such a sort of scholar of Superman. So without further ado, let's roll on my conversation with Grant Morrison. Enjoy. Hi Grant, welcome back to Half the Picture. How are you doing, sir?
Hi Billy, pretty good. Thanks for inviting us back.
Our pleasure. It's so great to have you back on. I mean, we loved having you on last time when you were talking about Superman and an All-Star Superman and your the influence that had on James Gunn's movie, and I think we started off talking about that, and then we kind of quite quickly went off into all sorts of weird and wonderful areas.
Tangents.
Yeah. So no, it's great to have you back on, and hopefully you go down a few more rabbit holes and tangents with Batman Deadpool. So I guess, for a kickoff then. So Batman Deadpool, is by the time this is out, the comic will be hitting the stands. It's, it's great to have you back on our stands, putting a comic out there. And it's your first superhero comic in a little while. So I guess, how did this project come about? What was the sort of starting point for you writing this?
Well, it was kind of easy. It was Marie Javins, who's the head at DC Comics, just sent an email and said, do you want to do Batman Deadpool? And it seemed so obscure that they would even consider me for something like that. I felt like I'd be the last person on anyone's list. But I had an idea straight away, and that was it. It's the sort of thing I usually turn down, but I instantly had an idea what I wanted to do with it, and that was it. So I really got into it. I decided to take it as seriously as it deserved, and and that was that. It was a very easy process.
And in terms of the idea that you had, because I think when you last came on the show, you said that because you mentioned the comic, and you said that when they pitched at you had this idea instantly. It was almost like this instant catalyst of the spark went off. And I was curious to ask, what was specifically the idea that set you going, that set you off on this story?
Well, just the fact that it was Deadpool, and Deadpool notoriously breaks the fourth wall. And that took me right back to my first sort of success in American comics with Animal Man. And obviously in that story, Animal Man breaks the fourth wall, more in a dramatic way than a comedic way. But because of that story, I'd put myself into the story as a character, almost as the writer of the Animal Man's adventure. And I'm trying to explain to him the existential horror of being a character in a story. Because I did that, it was then taken as read that somehow I was now a character in the DC Comics universe. So another writer in a copy of Suicide Squad comic decided to make me one of the Suicide Squad. So they introduced this character called the Writer, who's dressed in this weird, it was an echo of an echo of an echo of what I was actually wearing at the time. So it looks like a kind of Russian peasant blouse. It's this kind of, kind of Fiddler on the Roof look with the boots and then the tucked in trousers and this bizarre blouse. So I look really, really weird in it. But I've also carrying this little keyboard. So the character that's ostensibly me has the power to type into his keyboard and basically alter reality. And the gag in the story was that he has writer's block and can't type fast enough to save himself from these kind of bestiomorphs who were kind of werewolf-type creatures who'd been changed by the goddess Kirke or Circe into animal men. So that was the story, and they'd left me for dead. These things jumped on me because I couldn't come up with a plot. And it always annoyed me subsequently because we don't have writer's block. If you're a working writer, you can't afford to have writer's block. Writer's block is for novelists who've got 10 years to write a book. When you're writing monthly comics, there's no room for writer's block. You wouldn't have a job. So it always annoyed me, and I'd never get trapped in that situation. So So honestly, this thing has just been itching in the back of my mind for 40 years. And finally I got the chance to set the record straight and do something with that writer character and with that whole Suicide Squad mission that went so disastrously wrong for me all those years ago. So it was that. Everything came as a lightning bolt. I can get my revenge for this. I can kind of come back and just keep this story rolling on.
So it was it was the opportunity to write those characters of Deadpool and Batman, but also it was an opportunity to settle a few creative scores, I guess you could say.
Well, there was. I guess that was the goad that made me do it. Obviously it was Batman and Deadpool, and they're two super well-known characters, and I did like the idea that I could do a story that could just be for readers who'd only familiar with these guys from the movies. It wasn't really, although there's a lot of comic book Easter eggs, you don't need to know what they are. That's why it's kind of like the film version of Deadpool, and it's almost like a filmic version. It's a kind of platonic, kind of ideal version of Batman as well.
Yeah, your voices. It was what was apparent to me reading the comic, and like I said, and thank you so much for providing me with a copy that I could read before it went out. It was such a privilege to be able to read it before it came out. Is you haven't missed a step, it seems to me, at all with writing like Batman and all these characters that you're so versed with. Obviously, famously you wrote Arkham Asylum, and then your incredibly sort of epic Batman run that you did for 6 years, 2006 to 2012. It seems like you haven't missed at all a step of like that. There are bits of dialogue when you were on before, you said that Batman's superpower against Deadpool is almost his stoicism. It's he's not ruffled at all by Deadpool's absolute motor mouthing.
And in fact, Batman's almost the comedian in this, and Deadpool gets forced to be the straight man because Batman's sense of humour is so dry and so dark you don't even know he's being funny. So Deadpool's kind of stuck with that. He just has to go along and react, and every time Batman says "I'm Batman," Deadpool's "Oh God, yeah, okay, you win."
And you mentioned your Animal Man run because there's such. I guess we can get into spoiler territory a little bit with talking about some aspects of the comic that I'd love to dive into with you. There's this lovely homage to your Animal Man run in the first few pages where Deadpool counts down the walls and then he gets to the fourth wall and he turns and he looks at the reader and he says, "I can see you," which is exactly the same as Buddy did in that incredible moment in your Animal Man. And also, I guess, sticking with Animal Man, because Animal Man seems to me to be a comic about kindness. It's about kindness to animals, it's about kindness to each other, kindness to ourselves, even our fictional characters and what that reflects back and what that says about us. And I guess and in this comic, I felt the same thing. It's a thread that I think goes through a lot of your work, but in this comic, I felt that same sense of kindness and empathy, even to our fictional characters. Was that something that you were conscious of when writing it?
Definitely. When I started with this, I knew what the first scene would be, and it'd be the two universes coming together. They'd appeared prior to this in the JLA Avengers book back at the start of the century, and it was the anthropomorphic representation of the DC universe and the Marvel universe sort of getting together. So that I knew that was going to be my story. That would be a kind of sordid version of that, and. And I'd started the story with this kind of cosmic kiss and then gone straight into the world where Deadpool and Batman find themselves, the strange maze. And it just didn't work at all. And I realised that what was missing was a mission for Batman. And as you say, it had to be a compassionate mission to give a human element to the story and to see just an ordinary world before we start to move into the surreal world. So once I'd figured it, I realised, this is what the special sauce this really needs is for there to be a framing story where it's Batman doing something to help somebody. And he's doing something to help ostensibly a bad guy, a criminal who's given up and gone straight, but who's now found himself in a bad place. And so that really gave me the anchor for the story. Then it became about something. It became about Batman doing something nice for somebody, as you say. And really, for me, that meant the rest of the story fell into place. I could get away with a lot of the surreal stuff and the daft humour as long as I had a storyline that was then sealed off at the end, where you see, oh my God, Batman just did that. That's what this was all about. So no, absolutely. I felt the need that the story had to have that through line.
And absolutely, and it really hits home for me. I mean, and again, like even touching back to Animal Man, because I guess in terms of comparisons, that's quite an apt comparison, because you have the postmodern fourth wall breaking. Even the fact that in the end of Animal Man, you have you yourself bring back Buddy's whole family.
Yeah, it's a deliberate reprise of that moment. It's kind of as you say, once you spot that, you realise, oh, that's what it is. It ties directly back to Animal Man.
But I love that. I loved how, and it was very moving and touching, and like the fact that it's also a kind of Christmas story as well. Batman says Happy Holidays, and it's just a lovely, and you make that sort of stuff feel so authentic to Batman, who's typically very poised and stoic and very sort of and gritty.
There was also, they used to do a lot of really great Batman Christmas stories, back in the sort of early 70s and the start of what they call the Bronze Age, I guess. And there would be a lot of those like really great little 8-page stories with Batman at Christmas, and it was surrounded by fireworks and snow, and he'd be dressed as Santa and giving toys to the orphans, kind of thing. I felt there was already a space in Batman for that type of thing. To see Batman silhouetted with really bright lights and fireworks and a kind of more optimistic, positive thing, he still works. Batman works in any milieu at all. Because I knew the book was coming out sort of round about Thanksgiving as well. So I figured that it takes place in that period between Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Yeah, it's lovely. And you mentioned that the opening, because the opening made me laugh out loud, that opening of the two universes, the anthropomorphic DC and Marvel universes basically getting off of each other, which I mean, it was just as a framing device and as an opening sort of throw down the gauntlet, like, here we go. Yeah. I just absolutely love that. I mean, I guess it begs the question, like, who's better in bed, Marvel or DC? I mean, I guess drawing from personal experience as much
I think we see at the end, the DC universe is just kind of looking at her phone at the end of the story, and the Marvel universe says, hey, wait a minute, are you rating me here? So you can make your own mind up about that one.
Yeah, it just made me laugh so much. And speaking of that Marvel DC, going I guess deeper into that crossover, like I mean, I guess like I say, I guess we can go into a bit of spoiler territory here for people who haven't read the comic yet, but like you bring back two of your most sort of beloved characters that you've created for those two universes, Cassandra Nova from New X-Men and Damian Wayne himself, Batman's son from your Batman run. I mean, and what was it, why were you keen to bring back those two characters?
Well, again, the very simple brief that I was given was, okay, it's Batman, it's Deadpool. The villain has to be from the Marvel Universe, because the previous one, the villain was from the DC Universe, the Marvel book. So they had the Joker, and you could have one guest star. And I thought, well, the guest star's got to be Robin, it's got to be Damian. And the villain, and I was stuck for a little bit, who's it going to be, Dr. Doom, and then suddenly, no, of course, it's Cassandra Nova. Because Cassandra had just been in the film with Deadpool. So again, I thought when people see Deadpool, it's an easy leap to make. When that character appears, you get it. I don't have to do a lot of work to introduce the villain. All that has to happen is you see her doing her thing, and everyone will remember that because it was such a memorable image, the way she, manipulates people with her hands plunging into their brains. So I figured that would work really well, just simply because, she's utterly recognisable. And then, only then, it occurred to me that I'd created both of those characters, and so that was probably my biggest creation for both Marvel and DC, and the most long-lasting one and the most well-known creations. So the idea that I had the two of them in the story with this writer notion, with all the fourth wall stuff that was happening, honestly, it was like a Christmas gift. It couldn't have worked out any better, and it allowed me to do that kind of, the crazy ending that's in there.
Yeah, I love that. And with writing those characters again, like writing in those voices, because you talk so eloquently, I've heard you talk so eloquently before about writing a character like Batman, or even going back to it's like Marvel, like Scott Summers. You get that voice in your ear, and and I remember you saying that when you finished up writing your Batman epic, it was weird not hearing like Bruce's voice in your ear. I guess like picking up this comic and writing it, like what was it like hearing, was it like, did you hear those voices again in your ear, and was it kind of like writing kind of old friends again?
Yeah, again immediately. I mean, obviously I haven't written Deadpool, but Batman was just immediate. And the first thing when I started to think about it, that's what I heard was a lot of dialogue. You know, as I've said to you before, I mostly start with images in my book and work out the comics that way. But this one was just like a run of dialogue and banter, and I've got like 10 pages of just me trying to keep up with these two guys just doing banter. And I didn't use all of it, obviously. I mean, I used the best lines, but yeah, it came very easy to me. And I also knew that Batman's voice would be very different from something like Wolverine. You know, people might expect this to be similar to Deadpool Wolverine, but Wolverine's a much more stoic, gruff character. Batman to me is, as I've said, he's a guy who's gone through an entire lifetime of studying the world's most, finest martial arts disciplines and meditation, and he's won 1,000 battles, he's saved the world. This is a sorted guy, and my version of Batman's very together and very defined and very direct, but he also has a sense of humour, and as I say, it's a super dark sense of humour, so you can't really get around him, and the reason for that is that my favourite line in it is where Batman just says, look, I spent years like fighting crime alongside a hyperactive kid, and my arch enemy's a disfigured clown. Are you still talking?
That was it.
Yeah, because Wolverine can be riled, but Batman can't. Batman's been dealing with guys just like Deadpool his entire life, and he's used to that kind of thing. So I thought that made it funnier, actually, because it's like Deadpool just cannot get one over on Batman.
I agree, and that line was one of the lines that was one of my favorite lines as well, and that was the line that made me feel like, like I say, you're so keyed into Bruce's voice and Batman's voice, and that line made me laugh so much because you're so good at tapping into these little deceptive truths about the characters like Batman, because I think it's fair to say that there's not many people who understands and loves these characters more than yourself, and the amount of stuff you've written for them and about them over the years, and like that is true. Batman had a hyperactive working class 10-year-old kid by his side for years, and Joker is a textbook motor mouth, so Deadpool isn't even gonna it's like water off a duck's back.
Yeah, absolutely, it's what he's used to dealing with, and like I say, he just tunes out most of the time, which is why he's like, you've been talking this whole time?
And there's a kind of almost kind of stoic dad thing in that, like he's like, obviously Robin being his ward, he's kind of, he can just sort of, it's not noise, but he can just tune it out. He's used to it. It's like,
he just hears the important stuff. If he hears like knife aimed at your head, Batman, he knows to duck, but everything else is getting ignored.
Yeah, and on this story, so you brought on Dan Mora, the great comic book artist who you worked with on Claus, which is your sort of origin story of Santa Claus. You brought him back for Batman Deadpool, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what is it that's so special about working with Dan, and like why you brought him back on for this story.
Well, basically DC told me that Dan would be drawing it, because I think Dan draws every DC comic these days. He's kind of anytime, and especially if there's a special edition thing or a special issue, Dan tends to always draw it, and I think he's the quintessential comic book artist right now. I mean, the fact that his work is so good, but he can do so much. I mean, that's what they dream of in comics. It's like a Jack Kirby who could do 7 pages a day sometimes, which was kind of nuts. But Dan must be in that region. But what I love about him is just he's a brilliant storyteller. The characters are always acting. And as I've said, a lot of my work is about the nuances. It's about the glances and the expressions and the postures and the stance. And sometimes artists will miss that because they've got their own way of blocking things out, or they've got characters in power poses. But as I say, my stuff kind of relies on the subtleties, and Dan is just great at that. So he really does like half the work. He does what you need your artist to do, which is come in and make sure that every single character is acting and reacting correctly to what's going on, and that really makes a difference. As I say, he's great at action, he's great at interpreting the ideas that I give him. He's fast, he's got a lovely style, it's like new Neil Adams or something meets John Byrne. So no, he's just the quintessential comic artist, and he's the best person I could have got for this, I think.
His work is incredible. And in fact, that opening, so you mentioned Neil Adams and like, John Byrne, those sort of classic 70s and 80s artists.
Yeah.
Like when I was reading that opening of the two universes getting off of each other, I was really reminded of that sort of Jim Starlin 70s era and of those cosmic comics and the visuals, and also Brendan McCarthy's work a little bit with like Rogue and Gosh. And obviously I know that you're a big fan of those guys. Was that something that you were consciously thinking of when you were sort of writing the script and sending that to Dan?
Well, definitely, that first page is almost written as a parody or a pastiche of Steve Englehart. And even though Steve Englehart, I don't think he wrote these particular two characters, but I'm sure he wrote about, what's his name, Eternity, the Marvel one. It was just kind of a parody of that 70s style, that almost, the caption heavy, but like him and Steve Gerber would often lapse into rhymes and just weird things, because either they were stoned or whatever those guys were back in the day. So I just have it going into this ridiculous rhyme, and I wanted it to really have that feel of a 70s Marvel comic. But then when you turn the page, the idea was, I was looking at Bob Haney's stories from the 70s as well. Those amazing Run of Brave and the Bold that he did with Jim Aparo. That was the template that I wanted for this, because it's a Batman team-up book. It's basically Brave and the Bold, Batman, Deadpool. And so I went back and looked at his stories were amazing, because every issue there would be a new kind of big thriller idea. Every issue a new idea. Every issue was like a new movie. And so I kind of wanted that feel, and they kind of broken into a bunch of chapters as well. So that was very much on my mind, was trying to recreate the feel of that, which is why those first two Batman pages are the way they are. It's that Bronze Age Batman. And as I've said before, I was really happy that the new Batman comic with Matt Fraction and Jorge Jimenez has Batman in that really bright blue again, because that's what he wore back in those Brave and the Bold stories. He had this costume. They used to have this fantastic blue colour, which I call swimming pool blue. It's so bright, and I've never seen it since. I wish they'd bring it back, but the new Batman is the closest that I've seen to that. So again, that really fitted into the aesthetic that I was trying to create with this. And everything was just, like I say, it was all very easy to put together.
Yeah, that colourful Batman, which I think you clearly have so much fun writing. I mean, you're right, you don't see that, which I think is a great shame, because when you see it done and done so well, like in this, it's so much fun.
Yeah, well, with the new Batman stuff, as I say, they've given him all that blue again, and it looks great. I think it looks fantastic.
And for you, I mean, because when I was reading this, something I was aware of was your authorial voice as a writer in the comic, because it seemed to me to be written by someone who's having so much fun with the written word. And I must say, I think in the last few years, that's the sense I've really gotten from you in your work, in terms of even with stuff like Luda, your prose novel, which is fantastic, and even your newsletters, which, hands up, I'm a big fan of. I read them regularly. You have so much fun with the written word, it seems, these days, or have been having so much fun with the written word these days. And that's the impression I get anyway. And with this comic, it really felt like you were really just just indulging and relishing the language of it. Which I really appreciated, the captions.
Definitely that, and particularly, as you say, the way Deadpool speaks, because Deadpool's just motor mouth. He's always running his mouth, so you can just have a great stream of consciousness with Deadpool and just have him saying all kinds of ridiculous things, and that was just so much fun. But yeah, I was very precise about how many words were in the panels, and I took it all quite seriously for this one, quite formal. It's almost a how-to write superhero comics, So I'm going to do on the web, the newsletter, I want to do a complete breakdown of it, because it is so technically put together. There's a lot of things there that if I explained it to people, they'd go, "Oh, that's how you write a comic." But okay, I get that's interesting.
That's interesting then. So it sounds like a very, quite a formally crafted piece of work, in terms of you really put the. I mean, how long did it? If you mind me asking, how long did it take to write? Was it really deliberate? Very carefully constructed.
The way I work is I'll sit with my book, and I had a ton of dialogue, as I said, and then I started breaking that down. What's the best bits of dialogue here? And the story started off quite different. It started off in the strange maze world. And then bit by bit, I'll just throw out the stuff that I don't like and bring in stuff that I do like. As I said to you before, probably I go by feel, on these things. And if it feels right or sounds right or sounds wrong, I keep going. But if it sounds right, then I know it's time to stop. And that's what it was with this. But there was very specific things where I did it like one of those like Save the Cat type screenwriting books where I said, okay, right directly in the middle, here's where the big game change moment happens. So right in the middle of the story is where you do the turnover and there's Cassandra Nova suddenly to explain what's going on. And then, then there's more twists, and then I was throwing in different kind of just fan favourite things like putting Darkclaw in there and creating that new amalgam character for just one panel just to annoy everyone. It was all really worked out, and the twist comes at exactly the moment in a script where the twist is meant to come, and so on. And so yeah, it was pretty. I had a lot of fun just sticking to rules, like a Dogma film where I just thought, okay, here are the rules, and I've got to do this, and Batman and Deadpool have to be in the same number of pages, and a whole bunch of other stuff that I did.
That's fascinating because, yeah, it does sound like so meticulous. And you're right. Like when I can remember my first reaction reading those beats is exactly, they have the exact effect. Like, boom, you have Cassandra, and then boom, you have the revelation of you and the quantum keyboard and the writer figure. And it really works. I must say it really works. Those and obviously, I mean, you've been doing this for you're a dab hand at this. It sounds like it was a lot of fun to write. Although despite how meticulous it was just a blast. I mean, was that the case?
Yeah, the meticulous elements of it are just going in and fixing things, so it's not a chore at all. It was just great fun, and then everything after the initial blast of ideas is just editing, and editing's always fun, because you're honing things down and cutting them down to their best version. So no, the whole thing was great. It really reinvigorated my interest in doing comics again. So I've been doing a bunch of new things and kind of energized by Batman Deadpool.
Great. I'd be curious to ask about those because something I've been thinking about is the fact, and I think we even talked a little bit about it up at LICAF, is the fact that this is your first sort of mainstream superhero comic for quite a while, and I guess I remember you saying that like you've done so many of the big characters that you love, like obviously Superman and the JLA and X-Men, that like maybe that like you felt a little bit like, okay, where there aren't too many more that you haven't written. But it's interesting to hear that you said this has kind of, I guess, reinvigorated some of your passion for writing them.
Yeah, I'm not so much the superheroes, unfortunately. So if anybody's hoping that I'll come back and do more of those, it's unlikely. But I'm going to do. I've got a bunch of horror things that I wanted to do for a while, and that are mostly written. So I'm going to start with that and a new Sebastian O story as well, the comic that I did in the 90s for Vertigo. So I got a really good new idea for that. And again, things are unexpected. I never thought I'd have an idea for Sebastian O again, and then I got one. And I asked Steve Yoel if he wanted to do it, and he was up for it. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting just to be able to have a notion and bring it into reality.
Yeah, that's amazing. Because I mean, I really like Sebastian O. It's one of my favorite of your Vertigo comics, and Steve Yoel's such a great artist. He worked with you on Zenith as well, of course. And I remember, I heard you say that you and Frank Quietly, Vincent, are also talking about maybe working on a horror project.
Yeah, no, we've got it's like a 14 page thing, like one of those the trailers that I do in Xanadu, which are like movie trailers but done as short comics. And we have this thing called It's a Dead, 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 Dead World, and it's a really different take on zombies, and you'd be surprised there are still different takes to be found with zombies. So honestly, he's had it for 2 years. He's in San Diego right now doing a teaching session. And he's promised that he'll get onto it again. He's done his layouts, but it could happen anytime. We could all be dead. The sun could be, turned into a red giant. But he is allegedly working on this thing, and it's a great idea.
That's great to hear, because one of the fantastic things about you guys when you guys get together and you work on a new comic is that it feels like you only get together when you have something that you want to say or you're particularly enthusiastic about a story. So that's great to hear that you guys are working together again on something that is, clearly sparking you off.
And it was just to do something different from, we wanted to do a kind of grindhouse thing, because the last thing we did was Pax Americana, which was about as formalised as you can possibly imagine. Every single panel was worked out in this crystalline Watchmen-esque kind of way. So we wanted to do something that was a bit grungier and go back to, back to Vinny's underground roots.
That's great, and yeah, like you say, I mean, he can take a while to draw a comic, but it's the proof is in the pudding, and they're always worth it because
I mean they're always the best comics, but my God, he takes his time.
And I'm guessing he's in demand a lot these days. Obviously, with All Star Superman being as popular as ever, and We Free and everything.
I think the thing about Vinny is he's very focused on his family and on food and enjoying himself. So he tends to not overwork because he's got the right attitude, I mean, he works on big projects, usually for corporate clients these days. Like he'll do murals in hotels, or he did an amazing series of drawings for Bowmore whiskies. They're incredible. They're actually like whole stories that are unfolded, so that it's in the shape of the Bowmore box, and it's like folk tales. So he's got one with the devil being chased through a village, but it's almost like animated. So you start on the back and you see the devil and his shadow on the wall, and then you go to the next panel and the devil's further down, and then on the front it's giant devil climbing through the church window, and you can follow this whole sequence. It's like a comic book on an unfolded background. And they're really incredible. The background's just one background, but all the figures move through time in that background. Honestly, they're astonishing, and nobody even knows about them. Unless you buy these like ridiculously overpriced whiskey, but whatever they call them, but special boxes. But you won't even see this stuff. But that's the kind of stuff he does, and like I say, he's over in San Diego teaching right now, so. I think he tries to enjoy himself more than the rest of us are all workaholics.
Wow, I mean that's incredible. And actually, hearing you describe that sort of those illustrations that he's doing, it reminds me, we had Bryan Talbot, your old mate Bryan, on the pod on Monday, and Bryan was telling us about the Q line, I think the Q line that he designed, which in kind of comic book form that sort of tells the history of Sunderland across the sort of town centre. He described it as a granite comic. It was like, he was very much, still, even though it wasn't formally like a comic book, he was doing it like he was doing a comic, but over like years and building meticulously this huge long granite line.
Well, it's the same kind of thing. And it's very innovative, and I was looking at it and thinking, my God, if you did a comic like that, where it's just only the figures move and the landscape stays the same, but you're seeing a whole story unfold across a long shot of a landscape.
Yeah, and Bryan actually he was reminiscing a bit about, because I mentioned that you were coming on the pod, and he was reminiscing about the Near Myths days where you guys first met back in the 70s when he was doing Lou for Arkwright, and you would, I think that was your first published comics work. Am I right in saying that?
It was the very first thing. They were the first people to give me any money. £10 a page. It was astonishing. I couldn't believe myself.
Wow. And he was saying that like in those days it would be like run out by Rob King was the publisher, and he was running it out of the Edinburgh science fiction shop, and it was just a sea of dope smoke, and he was saying it was just like it was quite heady an atmosphere.
Well, it was, because I mean I didn't smoke. I mean I've never smoked, but I certainly didn't smoke dope. And I would come out of these meetings just like, what the hell? I remember just going into a chip shop, and I'm still there like 40 minutes later, and people went, can we do anything for you? So no, they were pretty intense meetings. They were very, very much in the underground comics mold.
Yeah, and he was saying that he even had to come, because there was so much sort of dope being smoked. Bryan had to sort of come in and be like, right, okay, I'm taking over the I'm taking over the book. This needs to be done properly.
Yeah, pretty much. That's what happened on issue 5, I think, issue 4. Bryan just had to come in and take over.
Yeah, and he was talking about how the like back in the day, like a comic like Near Myths could get national distribution, but these days, like you have to pay the publishers for them to put it out, and it's such a different ballgame. But you guys, like you and Bryan, will be able to get your first work out there to a mass audience and really get yourselves out there, which is amazing.
It was strange that kind of super experimental material, and aside from Bryan's work on Luther Arkwright, it wasn't that great. I mean. I was very young, and some of the other artists weren't great, but there was so much enthusiasm about it, and all the strips were very different, and they had a different kind of intelligence behind them. So it was an amazing thing to be able to do. And as you say, we were going to comic conventions and being kind of fated for this comic that nowadays you'd be giving it away at conventions and hoping somebody might read your comic book. You'd be handing it out. But we actually had it in newsstands up on the top shelves next to the porn mags.
And am I right in thinking that sort of like your neo-myth stuff kind of led into Captain Clyde? Because Captain Clyde is another character that I want to say you're bringing back, who was your first superhero. Yeah.
Well, Captain Clyde came about pretty much the same time. There was Near Myths and then Captain Clyde, and it was 3 local newspapers: the Govan Press, the Clydebank Press, and the Renfrew Press, which are on the Clyde here. It's 3 smaller towns that had their own papers, but they were all pretty much similar news. And my dad was always writing into them, because he's activism. He was constantly writing letters to them, so he'd become quite friendly. And they were losing their comic strip. Or in fact, at that time they didn't have a comic strip. They wanted a comic strip, and my dad said, "Oh, my son can do that." So I was given this comic strip to do, and it was great. I did it for 3 years, weekly. And it got super dark at the end, and it was I'm glad they stopped me because it was getting worse. But it lasted for 3 years, and then we got replaced by Tom and Jerry. But I'm bringing it back with Etienne Kubwabo, who's a sort of he's a director, and he does this comic called Beats of War. And Etienne is from the Congo, and his character's an alien who's arrived on Earth, and he's in Glasgow. So when we met up, we just thought, wouldn't it be great to do my Glasgow superhero from the 70s and your Glasgow superhero from the present day, and contrive some way where they can team up and compare and contrast the different Scotlands and the different Glasgows that we live in, and all this different stuff that I thought would be really interesting to talk about using these superhero characters. So yeah, that's another one we're doing for. We hope to have it out this year, but things didn't work out, so it'll be out next year.
Great. And is this going to be, where are we going to be able to find this? Is it going to be in the pages of the local Glasgow, like Clyde was originally, like in the pages of the local
this will be a comic, but I mean, all of where this is all going to be coming from is I've yet to reveal, so...
Oh, amazing. Well, I can't wait to read it. So last time, something that I've been really keen to ask you about is last time you came on the show, it was the day of the release of James Gunn Superman movie. It was Superman Day, I guess you could call it. And we were both really excited about seeing it. And which I want to say you have now. You were writing. You were writing about it in your newsletter. Am I right in thinking you said it was like your favorite piece of Superman media ever? Like you really loved it.
I said it was the best Superman movie, is what I thought. I didn't say it was the best Superman media ever, because there's probably a lot of things that I loved more. But no, I thought it was the best Superman movie to date, and that's what I said. And I did. I thought it was better than all of them. As much as I liked those Christopher Reeve ones, in hindsight, they're kind of hard to watch. Aside from Christopher Reeve, the stories are pretty terrible. This one just was more like a comic, and I thought it came the closest to capturing what Superman feels like. And I had a few things that I didn't like about it, or I thought, I wish they'd done that or gone in that direction. But again, I didn't have to write it. James did, and he made specific choices that I think were made for dramatic reasons that are understandable. But it just, things didn't sit well with me, I felt he should have saved the kaiju, for instance. That's what Superman would have done, and found a home for it, on Monster Island or something. I think in order to make him seem more relatable, they had him getting beat up an awful lot, and it just seemed like, I want to see him stop getting beaten up and kind of fight back. So there's a couple of things, but all in all, I thought it was a great start. I'm looking forward to the next one once they kind of get over the whole introduction thing and see what you can do next. But definitely for me, it was the best Superman movie yet in terms of capturing what Superman's really like in the comics.
I'd agree. I think I had a blast of it. I really enjoyed watching. I think that's the other thing, is that I think James is really, he understands, is like, as much as it's a great film, obviously about Superman, it's also just a great time at the movies. I think all of his movies are like that. He understands the importance of the experiential side of, like, you're sitting in like you talked about before, like you're sitting in a darkened room and the director is in control and he's taking you on a ride. And I think he really nailed that with this movie. I mean, I really do think he did. Yeah,
and it was funny. I just saw Fantastic Four, which is actually almost the same story, which I found interesting, and that was pretty good as well. It was good in the same way, and it wasn't great in the same way as what I felt, but both of them suggest something really great that they could do next. Once, like I say, once they got over just the introductory nature of these things.
Kind of once the ground's been set, kind of like Batman Begins. When you made your Batman Begins, you can then make the Dark Knight.
Yeah, because Batman Begins is kind of a conventional movie, and then you watch the Dark Knight, and it's like, wow, where did this come from? Well, they had to do Batman Begins to get there, you know.
Totally. And I mean, the thing I really liked about Fantastic Four and appreciated was, as someone who's a big Kirby fan, it was so nice that, like, at the end of the movie, they have that dedication to Kirby, which has been, in my opinion, a long, long time coming for one of these movies to finally frickin' say, you know, acknowledge the enormous debt like they owe him. But also, like, I really like the fact that Ben Grimm, the Thing, had the Jewish roots of that character were there. Like, he goes to the synagogue, and I really liked all that. I really liked that they paid attention to those details.
Well, and just that it was Kirby's Galactus, it was proper Galactus, you know, and he's gigantic, and it looked great, and it just shows that that's all you need to do is follow the lead of the comics, and you'll get incredible imagery. Because I thought that the last act was the best, you know. I thought the whole fight with Galactus was really, really worked well in that movie.
I agree, yeah. And I mean, even Ralph Ineson playing Galactus, there's a little bit of me that can't help but see that's Chris Finch from The Office, like in a massive Kirby suit.
All right.
You know? So,
see, I didn't know that, or else I'd have been totally distracted by that.
Yeah, I just couldn't help thinking him saying, Norrin Rad, bloody good rep, you know, all that stuff. So, I'm glad you enjoyed that, because we were talking about that before, about how, like, you know, those two movies, these sort of huge foundation stone characters of both those, again, both universes getting off of each other, like both those universes coming out.
But they also, those two films, they both had the heroes being sort of beloved, and then something goes wrong and the baddie comes in, and Superman, they steals the dog, and in this one it's the baby. The populace turns on them and they have to solve that problem. They were almost exactly the same story, which was funny.
That is very true, actually. And actually, as on that subject, I mean, because I think one of the most sort of talked about things about the Superman movie is that twist of, like, okay, Jor-El and Lara are not what they appear to be, and Superman, you know, the message being that, you know, the message that Jor-El sent with the rocket with Cal is being corrupted, and the rest of that message was actually him saying, you know, you feel free to dominate, you know, mate. And I guess, like, what was your sort of take on that? I guess it's quite similar to the John Byrne version of Superman, I want to say, right?
I suppose it is a little, except Byrne's, they were just more cold and scientific and lacking in emotion, whereas they were out and out fascists, you know, they would just go and take over and then shag all the women. So I didn't like it because I prefer when Krypton's this lost utopia. I like the idea that there was something amazing and nature just wiped it out, and their own lack of attention to detail allowed them to be wiped out. I think there's something much more poignant about that. For a long time, people like to take those utopias and go, well, what if it wasn't really a utopia? There was actually racism, and there was actually this, and it was actually just like here. And that's what happens. It becomes, well, it's just like here now. And that kind of, to me, diminishes it. But as a twist, in his version of the story, I thought it really worked. Because the thing that I found almost upsetting in it was that it felt like Superman's morality was quite fragile throughout, that it was just based on this wish fulfillment bullshit that he's seen his parents. Well, you'll go out there and do a kindly deed every day, son, only to find out that meanwhile they're racist monsters. So that's what I felt, I've lost my train of thought there. That's one of those ones where I started out in a long, long ramble and then lost myself on the mountainside.
I guess, like, the fact that, that his morality was quite fragile.
Yeah, that was it. The morality seemed fragile because it was based on this nonsense. And so I constantly felt like Superman in it could just become a bad guy easily. You know, he was like Batman and Killinger. It was one bad day can mess up anybody. So that actually I found quite disturbing. All it needed was something bad to happen. His whole head would collapse. And so what I liked about that revelation at the end is that he was able to ride on through it, and I thought, okay, that's Superman. Superman could handle that, and then he just shifts his attention to all the good memories he's got of his earthly parents. Yeah. But again, I don't know how well that worked, because the earthly parents seemed like an almost non-existent presence in the movie until the very end, and they even seemed to have different personalities at the start, where they come across as these kind of yokel characters, and then later they'd seem to develop a completely different kind of vocabulary and intelligence. So there was that too. But yeah, I thought all the story choices that I didn't necessarily like worked really well for this movie. So again, it's a version, isn't it? And it's like, do you like the version or not? And I kind of like the version. I'm interested to see where it goes.
Me too. And I must say, I agree with your points totally. I mean, that was how I felt coming out of it. I enjoyed it, and I liked it, but I was a little conflicted. But the longer I've let it sit with me, the more I think emotionally it lands. And I think that scene, because the scene I was going to bring up was the scene, I think that you're talking about where, his morality continues. So the scene where he sort of faces off with Lex and says, being human is making mistakes, but, that's my greatest strength. And I feel like for me, that is very much, for a lot of people, become a very important moment in the film and really resonate with people. And it reminds me, it's completely different, but for me, it's the heart of the movie in the way that the girl on the rooftop in All Star Superman is the heart of your story of All Star Superman. When you saw that, was that something that how did that resonate with you, that scene?
Yeah, well, again, I was happy to see him kind of showing his Superman strength, because like I say, I felt there was a fragility there which was worrying to me. And again, that works. That's dramatically that worked, because I was instantly kind of worried about Superman, which is pretty good because he's Superman, he's a tough guy, but they put him in a position where I was concerned that he would break down, or that he'd lose his compass. And the fact that he didn't was just nice to see. I'm glad that they just showed that Superman is different from us. He processes things differently and he finds the good in things.
And he allows himself to be vulnerable as much as, obviously he is invulnerable, but like he is also, he's a person as much as he is an alien, so he has that, so he is vulnerable as well, and that I guess becomes part of his fiber, and that's okay,
but I like that, because again, as I said to you before, with Superman, what you can show is someone who processes things differently, but it gives ordinary people a way of thinking about how they can process it differently, when Superman's hurt or alone or grieving or guilty, he processes it differently. He doesn't break down. He finds ways of acknowledging it, of dealing with it, of making things better. And I think that's always helpful to see that dramatised.
Totally. And it comes back, I guess, to empathy, because something that we touched on earlier, when going back to Batman Deadpool, I mean, the sense of kindness that is present in that book and in so many of your books. How important do you think it is as a writer to be, and just as people, to be kind, even to our creations, even to our fictional characters? Because that's something that you like is explicit in Animal Man and in Batman Deadpool, like the acts of kindness, even to the things that we create and what that says about us. Like, how important do you think that is?
Well, I think it's very important, but there's a lot of people who think it's not important. So, I mean, it just depends which side you choose to take. I mean, for me, it's definitely important to be kind always sounds, it's kind of like trying to claim a medal for yourself, but it's not. It's just doing the right thing in a situation. If someone or something's in trouble and you can give a hand, then you do it. You don't walk by. That to me it's a kind of pragmatism, It's like, and I don't know how you could walk by, but I guess some people can and not feel that that's a bad thing or that they've done anything that's out of the ordinary. Whereas for me, it would seem like the wrong thing to do. I don't know. It's a personal thing. Yeah, I definitely think people should try and be kinder and look after even bees that are falling on the road. You pick them up and you put them on a flower. It's simple, ordinary stuff like that. So definitely, yeah. I mean, Superman has the power to be kind on a global, interstellar level even. But we've got the power to be kind in our own, little patches and in our own environments. And yeah, of course, you should do it as much as possible. And the more you do it, the more you get it back as well. There'll come a time where you need kindness, and it'll be good, if there's people there.
Totally. And I think what's fascinating about you and your work is the fact that you extend that kindness to even the characters that you create and the characters on the page, like Buddy and his family in Animal Man. Yeah. Like there's that moment where you're talking to Buddy at the end of your last issue of Animal Man, where you're in the comic as the writer and you say, perhaps we can be kind. We've been sort of abusing you and your family for drama, as for an audience of readers, but like perhaps we can be kind. And it's the same thing with Batman Deadpool. With Batman, he gives Victor back his wife, and it's lovely. And I guess like even the things we create, we that says something about us, whether we're sort of kind to them or to as extensions of ourselves, or if we maim them or something.
Yeah, well, I mean, also, and you'll read people and that you've got to kill your darlings, and that doesn't mean just your really good sentence that you liked in a story that doesn't fit. It means being able to kill characters and thinking, well, this person that we like in a story is going to get killed by the monster or killed by the vampire. But as you say, I kind of have trouble with that, I've always had trouble with that, and I sort of feel that, okay, I'm in control of this universe, and yeah, maybe in the real world that person would be killed, but in my universe things are different, I felt that in We 3, when I thought the reality is the animals would just all be shot dead, and that would be it. But in my story, that's not what happens, because it's my story, and in Brian K. Vaughan's Pride story, Pride of Baghdad, it's based on a true story, but all the lions get shot at the end. You've grown to love them for like 60 odd pages, and then they just all get killed, and that's a real fucking downer. It doesn't really, it doesn't help. I mean, because you're already feeling bad, So when you close the book and it's they're all dead. So again, in my universe, I always feel like no, because I wish that I lived in a universe with someone like me just going, okay, today you don't have to die. And so, yeah, I do think it's a kind of responsibility that's stupid probably to think, but it does inform the way I'll approach a story, and it gives characters a really good chance of surviving things that they might not survive in other writers' stories. So I think that's why the characters would prefer to come and be written by me.
Well, it's like, but also it has an emotional effect, because like, yeah, you say, I mean, 'cause having read Pride of Baghdad and We Free, like, they're both great. I mean, the thing about We Free that's so poignant is the fact that you do have that emotional through line of like Bandit and then the cat survive, and like you have that through line. You still have characters at the end who you obviously care about and love, and so it all lands. I mean, it's a very different kind of, obviously Pride of Baghdad also lands, but you have that through line, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, and it could happen that way. They could be saved, and so I always like to write about the time where things go right,
Yeah, which I think, and going back to what we talked about when you first came on, I think it's so needed, and what was, and in this day and age, in the sort of the tenor of the times, there isn't enough of that around. And so
I think that, honestly, think about it, Billy, that really all films are kind of, there's a sentimental version of it, and I'm guilty myself, but films are really always about, the story always works out for everyone. There's always a happy ending. When in fact, in real life, it's the only ending for everyone is the same. But it's just it depends where you choose to stop the story, whether you get a happy ending or a tragic one. So it's kind of always like that. But what I've tried to do is at least to confront the kind of the darkness, as I've said, to at least talk about it. And the possibilities there, but I'd like to think it's a different level of saving characters than that, just the sentimentality of a Hollywood film where the hero and the heroine are going to make it to the end by and large, at least you do these days. I'm watching a bunch of 70s films again and nobody makes it to the end. But yes, I think about that. I'm trying to do that in a different way rather than just the obvious saccharine, like the good guys always win in these stories. To me, it's like the good guys always win because there is a power behind this that is trending towards the good,
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, it should be authentic. That's, I guess, I hear what you're saying, and I guess for me, it's like it's not a question of just like putting a happy face on a bad situation. It's like no, it's recognizing and the truth of reality, and then. But I guess it's like it's the question is like what's your response? So like the royal you, like how do we respond? And we can respond. Yeah,
to try and find ways round it, imaginative ways round a situation that might have ended in disaster. But it's the possibility of, well, what if there was this guy comes along? What if this does happen? Things like that can happen. People can find an animal lying by the side of the road and save its life. So I guess that's what I'm always looking for, is in the darkest night, where is the light? Where's the little light to follow to see how we can get ourselves out of this one?
And as I've said to you before, Grant, like that's one of the things that resonates with me about your work. And we had Owen Likes Comics, who's a great sort of YouTube comics essayist, and we were talking about that exact thing in All Star Superman and other comics too, and how important that is, and it's very and how profound it is. So and it's valuable, absolutely. Today, very briefly, something that I've been curious to ask you for a long time is so going back to Super Gods, your book, your memoir, and dissection of superheroes. You meant, and I guess mixing that with superhero cinema, you talk a lot about. There's a segment in that book where you talk about Unbreakable, the M. Night Shyamalan film, which you sort of you call the high watermark of sort of the cinematic treatment of the themes of the superhero. And I guess I just wanted to ask you a bit about that, and also to ask, have you seen the two sequels, Split and Glass?
Yeah, I've seen both sequels. I don't think they really work in the way that Unbreakable works. I think Unbreakable stands alone, and it's just a great movie, and one of the best superhero movies ever made. I just love it.
Yeah, because it's one of the few movies that actually takes those themes like at face value and takes them seriously, but also in a really intelligent, profound way. Like like Bruce Willis is extraordinary in that film. In his performance,
and the way that it presents things that you see in every superhero story, like where he's sitting at the table with his kid, and the kid sort of recognises that the dad is the hero, and there's the whole little sequence where he hides the newspaper, or he taps the newspaper so the mother doesn't see it. And the whole thing is he's just acquired a secret identity. He's just acquired a sidekick. He's just acquired a love interest that he hides his secret from. And the whole movie's like that, the bit where there's fighting the guy in the room, and it's like an entire Jack Kirby fight scene but contained in a bedroom. It's a monster, the guy's just he never speaks. He's just a guy in an orange jumpsuit who's... I think he speaks once to say, your house is now mine. It's something horrifying.
Yeah.
And it's the monster fight, and even when you see like Samuel Jackson, and you suddenly realise, wait a minute, he's in a basement surrounded by all these screens. Oh shit, he's a supervillain. And we didn't even notice it, because I was so used to going into my friend Jim that just died. His shop had all these screens, and he sat in his basement office, and you suddenly go, wait a minute, I've just been buying into this without realising everything in it's a depiction of something that you would see as a trope in a comic, but done in such a way that you only recognise it with a double take, And I loved that about it. It's like everything's in there. He's got his costume. He's even got the security thing on the back, and I think any further development of it just didn't work in the same way for me at all. It didn't do it. All the horde stuff, and I mean he was great. Obviously, he's a good actor, but just didn't do the job. The first one just does it all. The first one's just a pest, like The Matrix. It's one of those just perfect one-off movies that didn't need sequels.
It's funny because in Super Gods you basically predict the next two movies. You say like there was a rumor that it was going to be a trilogy of like Unbreakable, Breakable, and Broken. And it's funny, and then we got Split and Glass in some ways very similar. So it was kind of creepy that the prediction there. Whether you tapped
he probably just read Super Gods and thought, okay, I'll do that, but I'll change the names.
But it's great that because he clearly is such a lover of the material and of comic books. I mean, that's the other thing that is rare about it, is that like it's made by someone who really gets what not only superheroes but what comic books are about, and the iconography and the imagery and like the fact that he frames things like comic book panels like broken with pillars standing in for panel lines and all that. It holds up to this day. It's a remarkable film, and actually I first heard about it through Super God, so hats off again
it's definitely worth seeing. I think everyone should see that one at least once, and if you like superhero stuff, it's just great because it just, again, it does it in such a very different way from anything else, and refreshes stuff that's very tropey and cliched.
I mean, this is I guess it's a big question, but like, would you say that's your favourite sort of superhero film then, of like all of them all? I mean, there's a lot of them.
Oh yeah, there's a lot, but yeah, that's as a standalone, yeah. But also The Matrix is one of my favourite superheroes, because Neo's a superhero in the last frame of that movie, and again, to me, that's where it should have stopped. That's the promise of The Matrix, when he just flies up towards you and the coat's like a cape, and suddenly you go, oh my god, this is what he can do now, and you never need another one. It's like it's so perfect an ending. So that's another superhero movie I love, and And as for the rest of them, I don't know. I'd need to think. But yeah, Unbreakable probably is one of the purest, and it's kind of like a Miracle Man or a Marvel Man, that kind of thing. It just stands on its own, and it does something very different with very familiar material.
Great. Well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast, Grant. This was such a pleasure.
You too.
And it was great to touch base with you about Superman, but also to dive deep into Batman, Deadpool. And I can't wait to see what you've got. You've got a lot coming out for us to look forward to. I'm so excited.
I do. No, it was great talking again, Billy. Thanks.